I moved into the apartment because it was cheap and quiet. A little too quiet, looking back on it now. It was one of those long, narrow buildings from the 60s, 4 floors, no elevator, and a hallway that just seemed to stretch on forever. The landlord mentioned it had been mostly empty for years. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. On my very first night, I noticed something odd. There were 7 doors on my floor, but when I checked the building plans online, they only showed 6 apartments per level. The extra door was right at the very end of the hallway. It had no number, no mail slot, not even a handle. Just a flat metal plate where the knob should have been. The paint was newer, a dull, lifeless gray, instead of the yellowed white of all the other doors. I tried to dismiss it as a maintenance closet, but something about it just felt wrong. I slept badly that night. At exactly 2:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Slow, careful steps, like someone trying their best not to be heard. I crept to my door and peered through the peephole. The hallway lights were on, casting long shadows, but there was no one there. The next morning, I ran into the old woman who lived downstairs. I casually asked her about the extra door on my floor. She just stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment before she finally spoke. "There are only 6, she said, her voice flat. "I'm sure I counted 7, I replied, trying to sound cheerful. She just shook her head slowly. "No, there are 6. I laughed it off, but a strange tightness gripped my chest. That night, the footsteps came back. 2:17 a.m. on the dot, but this time they stopped right outside my door. I held my breath listening, and then I heard a sound I still can't quite explain. It wasn't knocking, and it wasn't scratching. It was more like someone pressing their face against the wood and breathing, a slow, wet, horribly close sound. I stayed frozen in my bed until morning. When I finally worked up the courage to open my door, I found something on the floor. A small, curled strip of gray paint, chipped as if it had been peeled from metal. I knew exactly where it came from. My heart hammering, I walked down the hall. The 7th door was still there, but now it had a handle, a cheap, tarnished brass one. I tried to convince myself it had always been there, that I just missed it. That night, the footsteps came earlier. 1:48 a.m., I heard them moving down the hall, pausing at each door for a few seconds before moving on. When they reached mine, they stayed. The silence stretched on, and then a soft voice whispered through the wood. "Wrong door." I didn't sleep a wink. The next day, I cornered the landlord and demanded an explanation. When I mentioned the 7th apartment, he just frowned. "There is no 7th unit," he insisted. "Never has been." I pulled out my phone and showed him the picture I'd taken of the door with the new handle. All the color drained from his face. That shouldn't be there," he stammered. He told me to wait in his office while he made a call. I could hear him arguing in a hushed, panicked voice, repeating the same 2 words over and over. "It's back." That evening, the hallway was darker than usual. Half the lights were flickering or completely dead. And the 7th door, it was open. Just a crack. My curiosity got the better of me. I pushed it open and peered inside. It wasn't an apartment. It was another hallway, longer and narrower than the one I was standing in, lined with dozens of identical doors on both sides. Some were scratched up, others were dented. A few looked like they'd been burned. And from deep within that impossible corridor, I heard footsteps, getting closer. I slammed the door shut and sprinted back to my apartment, fumbling with the locks. At 2:17 a.m., there was no walking. There was knocking, hard, angry, desperate pounding on my door. "Wrong door," the voice boomed, no longer a whisper. "You're in the wrong one." My phone buzzed on the knit-stand. A text from an unknown number. All caps. "Let me out." A second later, another one came through. "I took your place." Then silence. The knocking stopped. My hands shaking, I opened my door. The hallway looked completely normal again. 6 doors. The 7th one was gone, as if it had never existed. But on the floor, right in front of my doorway, was my apartment key. I moved out the very next day. I didn't even pack everything. About a month later, morbid curiosity made me look up the building online again. The floor plans had been updated. They now showed 7 apartments per level, and the tenant listed for my old unit. It wasn't my name. It was my name, just spelled slightly wrong.